as like, you know, immigrants first coming to this country, it was just a hustle. It's like, hey, like we gotta get our bread. You know, it's like I'm not thinking about voting.
And that's
Yeah.
so true. I think, like like for me, and I'm not even ashamed to say this, I'm a first-time voter. I am a first-time voter. I'm 28 years old. So that means I had 10 years, means multiple opportunities of voting, but I just never really was involved in it because I never saw my parents talk about politics, never saw my parents vote, or at least I didn't know that they voted. I know my father works for the government, and he was always so secretive about things that were political. And so for me, I just never grew up in that kind of environment. With that being said, I'm from the heart of Washington, D.C. I live in neighborhoods where we have senators and all these people. So I used to live amongst people who are very politically engaged. So I think I always used to think like, like I probably need to get on this. Like I need to be voting too. Like I need to be more involved. And then when this election came around, I just felt the timing was right.
Yeah.
I knew for me, like I needed my voice to be heard, and I understand the value of my voice being heard. And you know, we were talking just a little bit earlier, and I think it also is important, like what it is that I'm representing, what it is, my beliefs, right? And what is important to me. So when you start thinking of things like that, thinking about your community more and more, you start to really want to be involved. Like I said, I call it personal politics. We are our own personal politicians. So knowing what it is that we identify with, I think is so important. I think a lot of our youth, as we can call it, identified with that movement as well.
Yeah, this has been an interesting election because obviously a lot of young voters have turned out, a lot of older voters have turned out. So for South Asians, I think, like I said, I'm interested to see what that means for our demographic because generally South Asians, it's interesting that you say like you never saw your parents engaged in that living in DC and like having so much. I've been to DC. DC feels so political. Like everywhere you go, people are talking about politics. It's on TV, it's at the bar, it's at the library, it's like everywhere, you know? And so it's interesting because I do know that I saw that like a little bit with my dad, like the men. If you went to a party, a lot of the men would have discourse around politics. But you wouldn't see it so much with the women, whereas I think that's kind of shifted where, like you said, like your aunties are voting and they're running for things. And so that's awesome. Aunties should be voting and running for things. Maybe Kamala is the auntie we all need to start that dialogue.
So and that's something that I definitely have to really like I was just so happy to see Kamala Harris running, and for multiple reasons. And I know a lot of people were kind of like, oh, but she never, you know, endorsed her Indian heritage until now, politics. I'm just like, listen, I respect the hustle. If I'm trying to win an election, I will bring out every Desi thing about me. I will visit every Indian temple. You know, I will attend every Diwali festival out there.
I know. I feel like the conversation when she ran was, is she Desi enough? Is she even Desi? Like, is she even Indian? That's like, dude, this poor woman, half Indian, half, you know, Caribbean, black. Like, if you look even a little bit black in the Indian community, you're not accepted by the Indian community. Like, you got to be real about that. That's like the reality of growing up in like an Indian community is like the darker skinned you are, the less accepted you are. And not only that, she was half black. So they're like, how much of a pariah her mother and father or whatever, like their family must have faced at that time living in Oakland. And then to be like, oh, you never embraced your Indian heritage. Like, why would you? When they've never owned you the way that you've wanted them to. So I think like this is such a interesting dialogue that I saw with the older generation where I was like, you didn't, like, where are you coming from when you have no respect for her heritage, you know? Like it is hard because I want her to embrace her Indian side, but I can also see why that's a very difficult thing to embrace. And like at this point, I mean, she definitely has embraced it on a national stage, but it's not just for the votes. I think it's deeper than that.
Absolutely.
That's my personal opinion.
Absolutely. And like I said, like, I respect it. I respect it. I respect it so much. And I think as a woman, as a brown woman, I'm like, Kamala Harris, you getting up on there, you do it, like, you talking your talk, like, that inspires me. Like, that made me think, like, ooh, brown women need to get up on that stage. Especially we have such a high population of South Asian Desi people in America. Like, we have
it's not that high. It's only 1%. But it's like, okay. We're still a minority, and I think that we have so much representation for being a 1% population in the US, and I think that's awesome. I'm glad that we're starting to be, if anything, we're the minority of the minority. Like, we're the most not marginalized in terms of disenfranchised, but the most unseen minority in terms of being a minority, and I think it's just because of the way that we immigrated to the US, and it's interesting to think about. But that said, I mean, we got some cool people in Congress. Like, we have Pramila Jayapal, who is a badass. She's been a badass for so long. I mean, she's been doing her thing, and I feel like she's like a silent killer. Like, I don't know how much you know about her, but she's cool.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. And I love seeing more Desi people getting involved in politics, bringing out your representation, like, and also seeing your culture, you know, out there. I think is important. Like, a lot of us, I mean, if y'all, whoever's tapping in here, like, raise your hand or give us a shout out. If you have a relative somewhere who's come to America, like, someone that you know who's come to America, that means right there, like, immigration rights, right? And like, just that, identifying with that means so much. So I do think that even though we might be 1%, at least we're on the board. That's how I see it. I see it that we are on the board, and that's what matters to me, and getting that representation. I think nowadays, like, we see it so much in all sorts of fields, like Netflix. Like, we got so many series, so many shows about that. We've got so many, movies. We've got actors coming out about it. We've got, people in every single industry. We've got rappers. We've got musicians, artists. Like, we are seeing brown culture being represented. And so I think politically, Kamala Harris did that for us as well. Whether she's half Indian or whatever, she's Desi. She went out there, she stood, and I think that was just so powerful. For me, at least, that was so powerful to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Yeah, and I think, like, we're seeing a shift in, like, our culture for sure in terms of voting in elections, whichever way you want to vote. But I'm glad that in general, our parents and the younger generation is getting more engaged, and that we're seeing people running for political office that look like us. I think that's really important. Like you said, representation totally matters. And I don't know, that's all I have to say on that. But, like, I'm glad. I'm just happy.
You know what is interesting, though, that I was kind of thinking is something that I found kind of conflicting in a sense, is that we saw, like, for example, the Desi aunties and uncles who were supporting the Republican Party were also people who were like, oh, COVID, like, there's COVID, like, I'm gonna do my mail-in ballot, and I was just like, wait, hold up, but your party don't even believe in COVID. So what's your standpoint on that?
I don't know. I mean, it's so interesting that you say that, because it is, like, such a weird, people who support, I mean, why do people vote? I think that's, like, it comes down to, why are people voting? And I think from what I've read and what I've seen, and, like, as a person in media, like, I'm consistently getting people's narratives, especially South Asian narratives. It's from, like, I think comes from an inherent self-interest. And that's not to say they're bad people. It's just the reality of it. We vote for ourselves. Especially if you're, like, the hustling type that came to this country to, like, make a better life for yourself. I think that just